Over the years, we have shared a ton of recipes. During the 24 Days of Swag, I think every year has had its fill of recipes. If you've been to any of our events or retreats, you'll know that I like to cook and I kind of go all out. And so my recipes are often in high demand. So this year, when I was trying to think, what can I do? Because, I run out of recipes. I haven't really been into innovative cooking lately. I'm gone all the time. I thought, well, hey, rather than just list written recipes, I'm going to show you guys how to make some of my more popular things. And we're actually going to make a meal that will be a huge hit, I promise, huge hit for anybody you're cooking for, and is relatively easy to make. Don't worry about writing down, all the different quantities and stuff. I will have the links to the recipes in today's blog post. Just sit back and let's cook. Usually I'll start by getting my butter and garlic mixture ready. You can even do this ahead of time, and that makes it a lot easier. The stick of butter doesn't have to be soft like for baking. I just usually throw it out of the fridge when I'm getting stuff ready, so it's just not totally hard like it is with the fridge. I'm only going to make a half pan today because, there's not that many of us here to eat. If I'm making a whole pan, like a whole Pyrex big size pan, I'll use a whole stick of butter. But today, for our smaller pan, I'm just going to use a half. Take the butter, I'm going to put it in a little bowl, like this. And then I have several cloves of garlic. How many I use depends a lot on the size of the garlic. These are pretty decent size, and so I'm going to use about 3. Sometimes I'll use 4. If I'm making a bigger pan, I might use 6 or 8. And I found the easiest way to peel garlic, I'm sure this is not the fancy chef way, but it works for me, is I just kind of whack those ends off. And I take the tip of my knife and just kind of run up under this peel and flip it off. We're cooking here today in our rudimentary store kitchen for extra challenge, and so I have a special knife at home I use just for this. It's a little paring knife like this, but it's super dull. That way I don't hurt my fingers. So sometimes one needs a dull knife. Let's see if I can do this without getting the Band-Aids out today. So I just use that little tip. That's why I like a blunt tip on my fancy garlic knife. In fact, it's even bent. It's so old. So I'm just going to get all the peels off. And if there's any bad spots, I'll just kind of whack those off too. Get rid of these peels. And now my little cloves, I'm going to you can see where the germ is. Right here. Germs can be bitter. So I get those out. Just try to slice right through the middle of the germ. And then with the tip of my knife, I can just pull that right out. Again, this is where my blunt knife makes it a little easier. I'm being kind of slow today because I don't want to slice off the fingertip. That would kind of put a little buzzkill into the cooking show today. Now that I have all the nasty germs out of my garlic, I'm just going to kind of rough chop it into big chunks. It doesn't have to be tiny minced. These are going to kind of melt away once we get them cooking in our potatoes. Again, if you're a real chef, you're probably like, wow, terrible knife skills. Never claimed to be cordon bleu chef. Just Keely in the kitchen. If I can do it, you can do it. Okay. That looks good. So now I'm going to take this garlic, stick it in there with my stick of butter. Then I'm just going to kind of kind of cut it in there with the knife. You just keep cutting on the butter, and that will incorporate that garlic into the butter. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. We're just going to set this aside for now. We have it ready. And like I said, I will do this a lot of times, like the night before, and stick it in the fridge. That way especially if you're having that dreaded noontime holiday meal, it's nice to have your ingredients, just ready to go. So this is a great thing you can do way ahead of time. The other thing I do ahead of time is mix my potato spices. I, in fact, keep these mixed up all the time. I make these so often. And I have this. This is actually my official potato container. It's real fancy, as you can see. And it just stays with my potatoes. So I'm probably the only person who has a bag of potatoes with a thing of spices in there rather than the spice cabinet. But that's what these are for, is my little spice mix. And I've got the recipe for you, just kind of roughly what I do. I don't think you could really screw this up. Okay, let's get on our potatoes. It's very important not to let a potato roll across the floor, but that's all right. We have plenty. Ew, there's a nasty one. Okay. Sometimes that happens. But it's important that you buy either Butter Gold or Yukon Gold potatoes. Other types of potatoes do not work for this recipe, so don't even try it. I've done it. I speak from experience. You don't have these, think, oh, I'll just use some Idaho's. No, that's just an epic fail. Use the good potatoes. And we're going to peel these. You could just scrub and do them without peels, I suppose, but I've just always been a peeler. All right, now that the potatoes are all peeled, I've just kind of thrown them in the colander just so they don't roll off the counter. Usually helpful. We are going to use a little food processor. This is my travel size. I have like 4 of these. I didn't bring my big guy today. If one reason I like to peel is you might watch if there's any icky spots in your potatoes, just pull those out with the knife. Another reason I like to peel. And then I have my 4mm blade in, and just on pulse. See why it's a lot easier to do this if you have a food processor. Cuts down the prep time exponentially. And throughout this process, you might be thinking, girl, why aren't you washing your potatoes? Oh, believe me, they're going to get washed super well. The Yukon Butter Golds seem to be less dirty than like the russets that you buy. So it's not like you're working with grainy dirt as you peel and slice, but they still need washed. So that's why I'll put them back in the colander. And now I'm going to go to the sink and rinse these super well. All right, now that our potatoes have been thoroughly rinsed, it is time to dry them. I usually just use like a dinner plate. That's why I have the big rolls of paper towels here. So I'm going to take these and just kind of lay them in layers on the paper towel, single layer. They've got to be dry. If there's any little icky pieces, I just toss those. I want nice, big, pretty ones. I always have so many potatoes, I don't mess with these tiny little weird pieces. I just push them off in the trash. So usually you're going to be making these as part of a meal, and once you start peeling the potatoes, that's when you need to give your potatoes your full attention. I'm not saying you have to work like Speedy Gonzalez, but you do have to kind of keep moving on these, because once the peels are off these potatoes and they're sliced, the longer you wait, they'll start to turn brown, and that's the last thing you want. Nobody wants a turned potato in their dish. So make sure, you always do this ahead of time anyway, but make sure your other stuff is not in your attention. So right now you can pay attention to these. All right, it's time to get these babies going. We start with, remember the butter mixture with the garlic we started with? I'm going to take just a little bit of it with a paper towel, and I'm just going to rub it in the bottom of my baking dish. Since I'm just making a small amount of potatoes, just for us gals here at the shop, and I'm making them in my convection oven, since we don't have a full oven here, and I need something that will turn, I'm using just a smaller round dish. If I'm making them for a holiday meal, you can make them in like one of the big 13 by 9 Pyrex pans, or I prefer my deeper ones, especially if you have something nonstick that'll help with cleanup. I have a Le Creuset baking dish I really like, and I also have some nonstick cookware from Scam Pan. My mom bought me both those pans. They're a little bit deeper than a regular Pyrex, and that's what I usually go to. But today, we're not making a lot, so I'm going to use this. So I've now rubbed the bottom of the pan with my butter mixture. I'm going to set that over here for a moment. Time to get the spices out. And so I'm going to put these potatoes in the dish, just kind of in layers. Just use my paper towels to transfer them over and dump them in. When I get kind of a little layer going there, I take my spices and kind of sprinkle some seasoning, about like that. And they're going to swim around in here, but this at least gets the seasoning worked in between the layers. Just kind of, they don't have to totally be single layers, but just not too heavy. I'm going to put the rest of those on top. That will be just fine. Okay, those look nicely seasoned. Next, we're going to get some heavy whipping cream and pour over. You don't want the dish to like boil over, you know, spill over in the oven. But you want to get a nice layer of this in here or your potatoes will get dry. I usually put, I'm making a big container. I don't put quite the bigger size of this in, maybe 2/3 or maybe a full one, depending on if I have a really big pan. This is what, a quart pint size? I don't know my size, 16 ounces. That's about, okay, that looks good. You can see it's got quite a bit of cream in there. I think that'll be a good amount. It's not something I totally measure, but you get the idea. Okay, so now this butter, I'm going to dot it over the top. Just in big little blobs. Your hands get all nice and garlicky when you make this. That's all right. Tastes so good. Totally worth it. And it's not complete without a bunch of cheese. Unlike the tea towels and stuff a lot of you have from Schitt's Creek, we're not folding in the cheese. No folding. This is not that recipe. We are going to sprinkle the cheese. This is fresh grated Gruyere. I also grate it in my food processor. Perfect for grating cheese. I don't think you can buy fresh grated Gruyere. In fact, I know you can. So it's something you're going to have to grate yourself. It's no big deal to do. If you don't have any Gruyere on hand, sometimes that can be kind of hard to find, depending on, especially if you live in a good food area like me, not going to find it in Guthrie. You can use Parmesan. I've used all Parmesan before. I've used a mix. Sometimes maybe I don't quite have enough here and I'll just kind of mix them together. But even then, the Parmesan, it needs to be the fresh grated that you've grated yourself, not the so-called fresh grated at the store, or worse, the kind of the canned. No. That won't melt right. So now I put a nice thick layer of Gruyere on top of my potatoes. It's time to get these in the oven. This is not a dish that at this point you can just stick in the fridge and bake later. Your potatoes will still turn even with the cream. So it's time to get it in now. So I'm going to cover them with foil. Cover tightly with foil. These are going to go in a low temperature oven at 300. They're going to bake anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. Again, that depends on the size of your pan. I've made just a small pan, so I'm going to probably start at about 2 hours just for the low baking. There's going to be another half hour of high baking on top of that, so you need to allow for that when planning your meal. If it was a bigger dish, I'd probably do 2.5 to 3 because I do not want to serve people potatoes that are undercooked. These are going to, like I said, bake on low for quite a while until they're nice and bubbly and the potatoes are getting soft. About 20 to 30 minutes before you're ready to eat, you pull the foil off. You're going to crank the temperature up to about 375 and get it nice and brown on top. Usually when I reach that phase, you've got other things that are happening in the oven, and that's okay. I just stick it in there with it, try to get it up top where they'll brown. The temperature, if it's not exactly 375, it'll be okay. It'll probably roll with whatever else you have going on at the time. If you see that they're getting too brown, you can just put the foil back over, or these stay warm for quite a while. So maybe if you had another 10, 15 minutes left, you can probably just tightly foil these, get them out ready to serve, and they'll still be bubbly hot for your guest. All right, my potatoes are out of the oven and ready to eat. Do not those not look delicious? We're ready to dig in. It's not meat and potatoes without the meat. And one of the most delicious meat recipes that I make is also, I think, the easiest. I make this for my family quite often, especially if I can find beef tenderloin at a reasonable price, somewhat reasonable price. As you know, beef tenderloin, the prices are through the roof right now. But the good thing about beef tenderloin versus other type of steaks is that you really don't need as large of a portion size. It's very, very filling. Now, if you have somebody that's a big meat eater, expects big old steak, that's when you just make a ham or turkey and then save this for other times. It's a crap shop when you buy steaks. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. But the good thing with beef tenderloin is it's usually pretty good. I've even buy like the choice kind at Sam's, and while it's not just as over the top as when I get the prime from, say, the boucherie at La Baguette, it still is better than most steaks I buy at the grocery store. So it's easy. I fix this a lot for dinner. I first pat the fillets dry with paper towels, and then I'm going to brush them with a little vegetable oil. I'm going to brush the top. I'll just brush the top to get started with each fillet. Over here on the plate, I have an equal mixture, somewhat equal mixture, I don't really measure, of fleur de sel and cracked pepper. Fleur de sel is essential for this recipe. Other types of coarse salt, total fail. Has to be fleur de sel. It can be a little tricky to find right now. I was able to find flour salt from Spain, which they can't call it fleur de sel because it's not from the particular sea where it's hand harvested in France, but it's essentially the same thing, at least I could get it. You can sit and crack a bunch of fresh pepper if you're in the mood. Usually my wrist is not up to it. I just buy the coarse grind, throw it in. It's all good. So I've brushed my filet with the vegetable oil, and I'm going to put a nice crust on it, like this. I'm going to do this other one, this side. Okay, and then I'm now going to brush the other side. Our goal isn't necessarily to get it on all sides of the beef, just on the main two sides. So yeah, got a nice crust going there. Flip this one over. And a nice crust here. And these are going to be ready to sear. Now that we have them crusted, they're ready to sear. I have a nice, thick, heavy pot. This is my Dutch oven. You can also use a skillet. Whatever you use needs to be oven proof because we're going to put this in the oven. And I've never seared on a hot plate before, so we'll see how this goes. I have just wiped the inside of my pan with a little of the vegetable oil, just to drop and, take a couple paper towels and wipe it around, just so you're not right on the, hard pan. So here's our steaks. Let's see if these things are going to sear. So be the moment of truth. All right, I hear searing going on. It's a slow sear, but I think it will work. When I do this at home, I think it's the pepper. It'll about run me out of the kitchen, almost choke you up because of the high heat with the pepper. I'm always sure to turn on my vent fan, and sometimes I'll even kick open the door to the outside to help vent. And we're just going to sear. We're not cooking. We just want to get a nice edge on this. Once they're seared, I just move them over here to a plate for a minute to, not really to rest, just to so they don't keep cooking while I'm trying to get the rest of my act together. If you are making a lot, you can just sear them in batches. And once you're done searing, move my pan over here. Be careful, it's super hot. And I am going to put them back in the pan. I'm going to sizzle a little bit, but that's all right. And then I'm going to top them off with just a pat of butter, a nice sized piece of butter. Sometimes I'll put 2 if they're long steaks. And now it's time to put these in the oven. They are going to bake at 400 degrees. And it depends on how thick your steaks are. For a 2-inch cut filet, it's going to be like 12 to 18 minutes, depending on how you like it. 12 would be on the rarer end, where 18 would be more towards like a medium well. A lot of times like these, I bought these pre-cut. They're different widths. You're just going to have to kind of guess at it. Somewhere in that ballpark, sometimes they'll take a little knife and peek. That's all right. We're not trying to serve things up all fancy. It's more important to get things cooked right. Let's get these in the oven. All right, our tenderloins are out of the oven, and you will want to remove them from this pan so that they don't continue to cook more than you want. I'm just going to take and put them on a plate to serve. And like I said, you can cover these with foil to keep them warm, but keep in mind it will continue to cook them a little bit more. But otherwise, these are ready to eat. This may come as a surprise, but the vegetable dish that I make that creates the most buzz is my broccoli. I know, go figure. Of course, at my house, there is zero buzz because nobody eats broccoli at my house. But when I've made this for different events and meals, they say like the next time, like, are you making your broccoli? I'm like, really? People, I guess if you like broccoli, you're going to love this. It's actually requested. Julia Child, you know, my inspiration for a lot of things, but she was my inspiration for this dish. If you've ever followed a Julia Child recipe before, you know it's not always this exacting recipe. It's like you can do this or try this. So I feel like any Julia Child recipe is an interpretation because the way I read it may be different than, you know, everybody else who reads it. And then I've kind of adapted it myself. We're going to start with broccoli. I've cut the recipe down from what I've put online. What I put online is for a bigger bag. I'm just making a little bit for the few broccoli eaters we have here. So it's a real easy to reduce, and exacting measurements, not really important with this. So this is out of the freezer. I've just let it thaw enough to separate. I don't want it to be, you know, like totally thawed. So they're still pretty frozen, but they're not, you know, stuck together in one big piece. So my broccoli is ready. I have a big pot of water. I've already got it started getting hot, which is a good idea, especially when you're trying to boil on a hot plate. Again, we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to throw some butter in my hot water there. And then we're going to put a little salt too. For this amount, I'll probably put about a half teaspoon, maybe a little more. I'll put a teaspoon in. It's a big pot. Like I said, exacting measurements, not necessarily that important. We'll bring it to a boil. And once it's boiling, we're going to throw the broccoli in. Here's the deal with this pan is I don't know that on this hot plate I'm ever going to get it to a boil. And that's okay. So I'm just going to wait until this butter melts a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in. I'm probably going to have to lid it to get it to boil. So if you're unfortunately cooking on a hot plate like me, there's ways around it. But if you're at home, you can get it to a nice boil on your stove very easily. See, that butter looks like it's getting nice. I had it pretty hot before I started here. So I knew it'd be slow. So I'm going to go ahead and toss these in. Just get everybody in the pan. Come on, everybody. I'm going to get my lid. And we're going to, once it gets to a nice boil, I'm going to boil it for about 6 to 8 minutes. I want it to be nice and tender, and then we're going to drain it. So let's get this boiling. All right, the broccoli's done boiling. I have drained it in a colander. I'm just going to put it back in my pot here and then stick the lid on it to keep it warm. You can also just go ahead and put it on a serving platter and maybe put some foil over it so it stays warm while you prepare everything else. I've now put my skillet on the hot plate. Let's see how long it takes for that one to get hot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my butter on there so it'll be melting, since this thing tends to cook a little slowly. Oh, look, it's melting. We have some hope here. In the meantime, I am going to mince some thyme. I've already minced my shallot. I've taken a small shallot, a clove of garlic. I've got those minced. If you haven't worked with fresh thyme before, always be sure you buy the kind with a nice thick stem. If they have what I call a wimpy stem, don't even bother. It'll be sheer misery. And I can just take my fingers and just break that off. I just kind of slide the leaves off of the stalk, like so. Don't use dried. There's just, I mean, no point. Dried is not the same. You really need fresh thyme. It's an easy herb to grow. My husband keeps it for me almost year round. It's pretty hardy. He can move it in the garage, and that way I can always have fresh thyme. I just kind of chop up those leaves a little bit. It doesn't need a lot of mincing. And I've just got not a lot of time. I probably don't even need all of that. I maybe use about half of my recipe. Okay, oh look, my butter is melting. That's step one. We're going to get this butter to melting. Probably not medium high. Since I'm on the hot plate, I've got this thing cranked up. And we're just going to swirl it around. Usually you don't want to melt and cook butter on high, but with this recipe you do, because our goal is we want it to brown. We want it to get nice and brown and have a fragrant, nutty aroma. You want to keep this kind of swirling around. You can sometimes just swirl it with the pan, but since I'm again on the lousy hot plate, I'm trying to keep it attached to the pan as much as possible. I'm going to use my spoon. We're going to call that good. Okay, I think this is nice and brown and ready to go. We're going to take it off the heat. And off the heat, we are going to add a few things. Let's get these stalks out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and put my shallots. If you don't have shallots, onion will work too. Garlic, my thyme. Stir those in there. We're going to add just a little bit of salt and pepper to this as well. We'll put about maybe a fourth of salt and maybe an eighth of pepper. Like I said, you don't have to measure. A couple shakes will probably do, but do that. And we don't want to forget, we can put a little lemon juice. This is a lemon sauce, so it's just maybe a teaspoon and a half for this quantity. For larger quantity, you'll use a little bit more. And we're going to get those swirling in there like this, off the heat. That's a serving plate. Put our broccoli. If you've left it in the pan, there may be some water that's collected. You don't want to put that on there, so just kind of drain that off as you move it to the plate. So a slotted spoon would be helpful, but again, I'm roughing it here at the store. I don't have a full kitchen. But we're managing. We're making do. Okay, there's our little broccoli florets. And now our sauce, we just pour it over the top. Give it a little toss. This is a great dish to serve reheated. You can make it ahead of time and it reheats beautifully. And I've got the quantity for a larger. This is just a small serving, but in the recipe I've made a larger quantity. And you can make it. Get the big frozen bags from Sam's and make it feed a crowd. It's great for a crowd and it's an inexpensive dish and not hard to make. Nothing impresses everyone more than serving homemade bread. Here's the secret. It's really easy to do. It really doesn't take that much time. You just have to kind of plan ahead and start early. It's not a last minute thing. The night before, I prepare a biga. I usually do this before I go to bed, and it's very easy to do. You start with the biga, which is your starter. It's not a lot of work here. I've got 2 cups of flour in my bowl. I'm going to put, let's put the yeast in next. I'm going to put a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast, and then we're going to add a cup of cool water, and we're going to stir it together. Big deal. See how easy this is to do? I've got where I like this little flat spatula for it because it doesn't get stuck up in the bowl with a spoon and I can get the sides pretty well. I'm going to get it till it's all moistened and combined. If you need to add a little bit more water, do. It's no big deal. Everybody acts like making bread and you have to be so exacting with your amounts. Hogwash. If it's dry, put more water. If it's too moist, put a little flour. I'm starting to get a nice ball here. That's what I want. Push it around, make sure I've got everybody incorporated well. And I do scrape down, try to get as much of that gunk off the sides because by morning this is going to be nice and hard and crunchy. So scrape down the stuff. That looks good to me. I'm going to cover it with a tea towel. I usually like put it on my stove or on the counter, just somewhere. You don't want to put it anywhere cold. I'm going to cover with my tea towel, and I'm going to go to bed. Well, not now, but when I'm making normally, I wish I were going to bed. I'm tired, but instead I'm making movies for you guys. But that's all right. So this is the point where you just, chill, go do something else, and leave it overnight or about 12 hours. We're going to let it get nice and poofy overnight. Okay, it's been 12 hours overnight. Magic of cooking on video. We can make things like that happen. And let's check out our biga, which is our starter. Let's take a look. As you can see, we have this nice, sticky mess with holes. It doesn't look necessarily all that yummy, but it's not supposed to. But that is our biga. It is good and ready. So what we're going to do is it's time to get our mixer out. If you have a mixer with a dough hook, perfect. If not, bread machine works great too. If you don't have any of those two, then you're doing this by hand. So I'd recommend getting your hands on the mixer with dough hook or a bread machine. Again, I like this little flat spatula I found because I can really scrape that off the sides nicely without getting a bunch of goo in my spoon. So I'm going to release it from my bowl and get it in the mixer. I'll probably help I get this hook off first. And usually this is the part I'm doing like at the crack of dawn, especially if you're having one of those noon meals. So I'm usually half awake in my bathrobe. I try to have everything as pre-measured and prepared as possible. So all I have to do is just, mix up this dough real quick and go back to bed. Okay, so I've got the biga in there. I'm going to add a half cup of water, cool water. And we're going to mix, but I am going to throw a little flour in with it. I'm going to start on low because it will really splash everywhere. How bad it's going to splash today. It's not bad. That's not too bad. Before it gets too splashy, I'm going to start putting a little bit splashing everywhere. I think we need our cover. Let me go get that. All right, this will make it a little better, but even then, trying to mix the biga with just the water is a splashy mess. So I try to reduce that by putting a little flour in to help it get smooth. Okay, I've got enough flour in that I can mix my biga. Okay, I've got a sticky mess. That looks good. That's what we want. I'll put this back down on low. Before I put all of my flour in, I'm going to add a teaspoon and a half of salt. And we're going to put our yeast in. I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of yeast in here. And now we can start adding our flour. I've got about 2 cups measured out here. So don't add it too fast or you'll get covered with flour. Say at this point you're adding about 2 to 2.5 cups of flour, but again, just use your eyeballs. If it's too dry, stop adding flour, put a little more water in. You can kind of go back and forth a little bit. I'm getting a nice ball. Just take a look at it and see how sticky it is. We'll decide how we're doing the flour. Let's take a look at this. I'll lift it up here so you can do See, it's pulling away. I think it needs more flour. See, it's too sticky, so we're still need to keep putting the flour in. Way too sticky. Oops, I'll lock that down. I'm going to put the rest of this flour in. So I'm going to put kind of a generous 2 cups of flour in with this. I just use this to measure with. Normally I use actual measuring cups, but we're cooking here at the store, and I forgot to bring my the only measuring cup. We have some 8 cups, so we're just winging it here. Okay, so see, I've got this nice, it's got a little stick to it, ball of dough. And before I put that in the bowl, I'm going to spray it. A little spray pan. Lightly greased bowl. Just kind of knead it together a little bit by hand, make a nice round ball. We're going to plop it in there and cover it back with the towel. Put it somewhere warm and not drafty, not hot necessarily, just a warm place, which if you're cooking in the winter can be a little challenging to find. My kitchen, the stovetop seems to, maybe I'll turn the light on, seems to be my go-to place for this. And now it's going to rise. We're going to let this rise for at least 90 minutes, sometimes longer. It doesn't have to be exacting. And you're supposed to about every 30 minutes or so punch it down, and we'll do that here in a minute. But like I said, usually at this point I'm going back to bed for another hour or so. It'll be all right. I'll punch it down when I get up. So let's let this rise, and then we'll be back in a second and start punching it down. All right, it's been about 30 minutes, so let's see how our bread is going. As you can see, we've got a nice poofy dough. So we're going to punch this baby down, just deflate it. I kind of roll it over in the bowl. And let's put it back into rise. We'll do this again in another 30. All right, it's time for our second punch down. You can see in just 30 minutes how much punch, pop back up. So let's deflate this guy. All right, now we're going to stick it back in for the final rise. And this would be a good time to go ahead and start your oven. Get it preheating at 425 so that it'll be nice and hot and ready for us to bake. All right, it's our final rise on our dough. So I'm going to punch it down and get it out of the bowl here. Right there. We're going to knead it by hand. Just a little bit. I'm going to form it into kind of a log shape. Take my knife. It's going to be a sharp knife. At home I kind of have a dull bench knife that I use for this. I'm going to divide this into thirds, roughly. Just be able to use my hands better. This looks about even. This one's a little small. Let's put some of this over here. All right, so I've got 3 balls of dough. We're going to make bread. Very impressive. Really not that hard to do, I promise. I'm going to take and form these into a long rope. Just roll them back and forth between my hands. You don't want to get them so skinny that they want to break or get real thin in a spot. Try to get them a pretty decent length. That looks good. There's one. And they'll kind of contract as they lay down, but that's all right. All right, so now we have 3 long ropes. Normally I will make this on a long baking sheet covered with parchment, but it's kind of like chopped around here, except for random ingredients. I'm using a lot of the implements we have here. We do not have a real oven at the store. I recently bought us a new, really not a very expensive combo of microwave oven air fryer. So we're going to attempt to make bread in it. I like the drama. So we're going to lay them on our round pan. We'll see how this goes. I can make bread at the shop kitchen with the lousy convection baking things, and you can make it at home in your real oven. So now we're going to make the braid. You know how to braid here. You can make bread. Not that hard to do. Just braiding them like this. Then I get to the end, I'm just kind of pinch and tuck. Then I'll go back here to the beginning and do the same. As you can see, someone fall on the floor. There's our braid. And now we're back to the rising again. We're going to cover this and let it rise until it's nice and poofy. You don't want to let it get so big that the braid starts coming apart. Depending on how warm your kitchen is, I'm going to guess about an hour. So let's let this rise. All right, well, our loaf got super poofy. Look how poofy that got. It rose faster than I thought it would. That's all good. Mine's not always this poofed, but looks good to me. All right, so what I've got here, let me mix this up a little better. I have got an egg white and just a splash of water. I don't really measure. I guess about a tablespoon. I'm just going to kind of beat that water into the egg white a little bit. Now take a pastry brush and I'm going to brush top of the loaf gently with the egg wash mixture. Egg is the glue of cooking. It'll also help it brown. And now I'm going to sprinkle the top with sesame seeds. Have my oven all hot and preheated. When I'm at home in my real oven, I'll take a bottle of water and just spray as it's heating up occasionally to kind of add some moisture. This will help make your crust a little crispier, and I'll do it a little bit randomly as it first starts baking. But since we're in my, cheap whatever oven here, I'm not going to spray water in it, but I'm sure our bread will still turn out just fine. All right, let's get this in the oven. We're going to bake this for about 20 to 30 minutes until it's nice and brown and looks done. All right, our bread just came out of the oven. Look how beautiful it is. If you're worried that it's not done, sometimes I'll just kind of tap on it. Sounds nice and hollow. That means it's good. If you don't get that kind of knocking sound, it may still be doughy inside. What I love most about this bread, especially when you're doing holiday meals, is it's often hard to get oven space for rolls and such. You've got everything else in the oven that needs to be cooked, and it's hard to find time to, and in the space to get the bread in the last minute. No one usually wants to eat like cold rolls. This bread is delicious when it's not hot. You know, usually I'll bake this kind of in the middle of everything else. In fact, it doesn't take that long to bake, so I can like pull something out real quick, throw this in, bake my bread, pull it out, and I will just put it on a rack and just leave it like this and then slice it and serve it as it is. It does not have to be hot. That's the beautiful thing about it. And if I can bake this in my, version of the Easy Bake Oven here at the shop and make it successfully, then you really have a great chance of, knocking it out of the park at home. It's not a party at SWAC without this tea. I came up with this recipe several years ago, and honestly, if I don't make this, I think there would be like mayhem, because everybody's like, where's the honey peach tea fizz? It's super, super easy to make. Over here, I have 4 cups of boiling water, and I'm steeping my tea bags in it. In fact, normally I wouldn't keep it boiling like this, but I'm getting ready to do some stuff to it, so I just left it on. And we all know how hard it is to get this hot plate to actually make something boil, so this is kind of a small treat. Okay, so my tea is steeped. And the tea bags that I'm using, I use the ginger peach tea bags from Republic of Tea. That's what you want to buy. That's kind of the key ingredient. Okay, so we've got this steep, so I'm going to take my tea bags out. All right, while it's nice and hot like this, I'm going to go ahead and add sugar. It's a 1/4 cup of sugar and a 1/2 cup of honey. I'm not going to measure because this is, I guess we used up all the honey waffle making, but this is close enough. Again, a 1/2 cup-ish will be fine. Always add a little more sugar if you're low on honey. I can do this without getting it all over me. Let's get that honey in there. We want it to just dissolve. And we're going to turn this off for a slow more. All right, now we're going to let this cool before we add more ingredients. We're going to put lemon juice in next, but let's let this cool. All right, now our tea has cooled. I'm going to whisk in a 1/4 cup of fresh lemon juice. You could probably use the not fresh, but I like the fresh. Now I'm going to put this in my pitcher very carefully. We're going to add a 2 liter of ginger ale, chilled. All right. Just that just a little bit more left over. Usually just pouring the ginger ale in mixes it up. And then you want to add ice. You can either serve it over ice, but usually we're making this like in a big pitcher or a dispenser for a party, and so we'll go and ice it down. And it's ready to enjoy. Let's pour up a glass now. Your guests will thank you. Yum. All right, we're going to wrap up our meal with a little hot chocolate. I love hot chocolate. I even have a mug that says so. That's my kind of go-to when I'm cold. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I have a hot chocolate instead. I've got the recipe online for my hot chocolate mix. It's just basically cocoa powder, sugar, and a tad of salt. You can always adjust the sugar to your liking. I've got mine kind of in the middle, not too sweet, not too not sweet. And I'm going to start with just some boiling hot water. And I just want to put enough in there to make it not a powder anymore. I'm going to make it into, it's kind of like a chocolate roux. A little bit more in. I mean, you can't really screw this up. Well, I suppose you could, but it's not that hard. All right, so now I've got kind of a nice chocolate roux. My ratio for my mix is basically, it's a half cup of the mix, and then I'm going to add 2 cups of whole milk. Let's get those whisked together. Crank up our heat here on our lousy hot plate. And now we wait for it to get hot. It doesn't take that long at home. It takes a little bit longer on my hot plate. But while we're waiting, you might wonder why we're not wrapping up our dinner with something like, I don't know, creme brulee. Well, I would love to show you guys how to make creme brulee, but unfortunately creme brulee making has been kind of put on the back burner right now because I can't get vanilla beans. This isn't just a pandemic thing. Getting vanilla beans has been very difficult even the years up to before the pandemic. I used to always order them in bulk, like I get like a whole kilo, and from Australia. If you ever hear it, I get it in. It's really exciting. You know, they're so big and so moist. My hands would be brown just from handling. I kind of became like a, you know, corner girl bean dealer. But the drought wiped out the whole plantation, and there went my, you know, vanilla bean source. And since then, Madagascar, if you've read much about the economics of the whole situation, has kind of got the corner on the market of those, and the prices just have been going up and have only gotten worse. And I refuse to use a little dried up beans for $10 at the store. I want big, plump, and juicy, but I don't really want to, you know, take out a loan to buy them. In fact, I think the price of vanilla beans, and this is even going back pre-pandemic, was higher than gold. So creme brulee making on the back burner for now, because I'm not making it if I don't have really good beans. But my hot chocolate, it's a pretty good way to end any meal. A few pro tips from previous experience. We've done hot chocolate bars here before. Lots of fun. Whatever you do, do not attempt to serve this out of a coffee urn. No, we did that one year. It was in my nicer coffee urn that I got from my grandmother, or I'd have just pitched it in the trash. I think it took us weeks of soaking to get it clean. It was a nightmare. So this year I invested in a, you know, little carafe, you know, a heat carafe to put it in. You can serve it out of a crock pot with a ladle, but you better plan ahead, because we tried doing that for one of our events and we thought it would never get hot. In fact, we wound up doing it little batches in a little pan on the stove. Yeah, stovetop works best. It works best if you have a real stovetop, but we've had a lot more luck getting us hot on our little hot plate here than in a crock pot. All right, we're going to wait for this to get nice and hot, and we're going to have some hot chocolate. All right, looks like our hot chocolate is nice and hot and ready to serve. Oops, I am very bad at this. I'd have been a terrible waitress. I sometimes will make real whipped cream. That's really the best, is when you have real whipped cream. Nothing is better. You just put some, you know, whipping cream in your KitchenAid mixer with your whisk attachment. I sprinkle a little sugar and let it rip, and it's divine. But if you're feeling lazy or just, you know, here at the store, forgot to bring your whisk attachment, this will work too. I always buy the real cream kind. Top it off with whatever you like. We have, for a hot chocolate bar, we'll serve, you know, different syrups. We'll have sprinkles. We even have like candy canes, marshmallows, cinnamon sticks. It's all good. I naturally have to have some sprinkles. Everything's better with the sprinkles. I hope you've enjoyed our little cooking segment today. I doubt Food Network's going to be calling anytime soon, but I thought you guys enjoy seeing the recipes being brought to life. Oh, I have prizes for you today too. The recipes aren't enough. Let me show you what our prizes are. Okay, today we have giveaways for 2 lucky viewers. First of all, we think everybody needs sparkle. And this drink glitter, edible drink glitter from Sugar Mama Shimmer, this is going to make you happy and bring you a little bit of joy. It's so fun for parties. It's edible. You can put it on desserts and drinks, and it adds a little sparkle. Let's see what happens. We've had a lot of people asking about, what about red wine? I'll put a little purple in there. Can you see it swirling? Look at the swirls, all the little sparkles. We'll put some gold in our ginger peach tea. Takes a little bit more. I want lots of sparkles. See it sparkle? That one might need a little bit more. Try that A little bit more in there. Oh, I see it. It's got glitter. It's in there. You can play around with different color combinations, but you can't go wrong. This one needs to mix up a little bit more. It is definitely a sparkling and a swirling. This is a white wine. We're going to throw some red glitter in there and see what happens. Spill me. A little bit more. I want lots of glitter. Check it out. Isn't that fun? So everybody's going to win a little sparkle of glitter, drink glitter. That's not all. I have more. I have all the recipes that we have gone over today. I have made you a nice set of laminated recipe cards for you to use. And these are magnetic. I've got these spice containers that I have put together. Some of the ingredients that are a little maybe harder to find. You can't just pick it up at Walmart or the grocery store. And this one are enough tea bags of the ginger peach tea to make a batch of tea. This one is full of fleur de sel. Well, flower salt. I couldn't find fleur de sel, but same thing. And, oh, we got another one with potato spices. I have put together all the spices that I use in my potatoes, so all you have to do is shake it on and not have to worry about trying to replicate my blend. To get your name in for the drawing, again, we're going to pick 2 lucky winners. Go on today's blog post at news.swagnet.com. Just let us know what color drink glitter you would like to win. We have tons of colors. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow.